we'll go ahead and get started. It's been a busy week, and as the deadline in the House to hear Senate bills comes to an end, there have been several major issues that have been discussed at the Capitol that we wanted to address and then take questions. Obviously, workers' compensation passed off the House floor yesterday. Our caucus believes it was a sad day for workers in the state of Oklahoma. My colleagues fought valiantly in my absence, and I'm proud of their efforts to stand up and fight for people who don't have the high-powered lobbyists to come out here and to try to twist arms and convince people to vote against the self-interest of average everyday Oklahomans. Yesterday, they saw their benefits cut by nearly 30%. They saw their businesses that they work for have an opportunity to leave them virtually uncovered if they ever get hurt on the job and no fault of their own. And we believe that not only are there parts of the bill that are unconstitutional and the court will stand with us on those issues, we believe that if this thing were to become law, the public, when they finally see it in action, will be repulsed by it just as we have been. The second issue on tax cuts, it's sort of a mixed bag. I guess the House Democrats are grateful that Republican leadership have finally realized that we've been right all along. We simply cannot afford to cut income taxes this year. We've said it for a year now, and the governor and Republican leaders said, oh, no, of course we can. Well, finally they come to the understanding that, no, we can't. We cannot afford to cut income taxes this year because education has been cut by over $250 million. Department of Corrections is in desperate need. Department of Transportation is in desperate need. Our state troopers, and the list goes on and on. Well, to their credit, they said, no, we're not going to cut taxes this year. They essentially said the House Democrats are right. However, they have severely erred in the fact that they now believe that they can predict what the economy in 2015 will look like. We can barely predict what the economy will look like in 2 months, let alone in a year and a half. And for them to cut what will essentially be $250 million out of the state budget with virtually no growth. At least in past years, when tax cuts were put on the table, they were tied to a 4% growth trigger. These tax cuts simply cut revenue, even in times of zero to virtual no growth in the state of Oklahoma. We believe that's fiscally irresponsible. And so those are the two big issues of the day, and I know you probably have a lot of other questions, and I've got colleagues here who will be able to help me answer some of those.
Senate Democrats argue that this tax cut is log rolling because you got the bond money in it and the tax cut. What do you think?
Well, if they're going to take this special project funds to fix the Capitol and tie those together with the income tax cut, we believe that Jerry Fent will probably file a lawsuit and kick that out. Those are two separate entities. Now they're tied together in the sense that if they're not going to cut taxes this year, then certainly they can use some of that money to pay for repairs on the Capitol. But to put them in one piece of legislation was probably log rolling. I think they're right.
What do you think with this gun bill coming back up today?
Representative Shelton? No, that issue's been litigated on the House floor. It's a hot button issue for a lot of people. We're disappointed in the sense that we believe it was a waste of time today to relitigate that issue on the floor. The Senate's already had their chance to hear it. It already passed off the House floor. We have lots of other more important pieces of legislation to address, but instead of getting to those bills, just like we did at the end of the House calendar where we debated things like nullification and Agenda 21, to relitigate this gun battle that the majority of Oklahomans don't support, we think is a major waste of time.
Do you agree it's a slap in the face to the Lieutenant Governor's Blue Task Force?
My caucus and myself personally as the leader, I supported the Lieutenant Governor. He asked if I would stand with him in supporting his Blue Ribbon panel. I did that. The Speaker did that. The Governor did that. We all said, let's wait for them to come up with a solution. We had law enforcement, educators, parents. It was a group of a broad cross-section of society, of Oklahoma society, came together and came up with their solutions, and none of them included putting guns in the classroom. We trust them, and we wish Representative McCullough would do the same.
This week, Governor Fallin criticized the Department of Corrections for balances in some of its revolving fund accounts. What do you think about that?
We support additional resources to the Department of Corrections. We understand that $22 million, and having studied the issue somewhat, we don't believe Director Jones was trying to hide any money from the governor. To say that because they may have $22 million in several revolving funds, we think is akin to when Representative Nelson tried to go after the schools for having carryover money. The money is there to be used for necessary costs within the Department of Corrections. But to say that, well, because they have $22 million means that the additional $300+ million that they absolutely need to run the Department of Corrections isn't necessary to fund anymore, we believe that's misguided.
Do you think it was a political stunt for the governor to do this as a means for not?
I don't want to call. I'm not willing to go out on a limb and say it's a political stunt, but we've heard grumblings that there's just a disagreement within leadership and Director Jones and the Department of Corrections, and that's unfortunate because at the end of the day, those men and women who work for Director Jones and the people of Oklahoma are severely understaffed. That 69% number exists. They need more resources. They're understaffed, and this arguing match between the governor and Director Jones over revolving fund money will not solve that problem.
This might be a first step toward maybe trying to push Jones out of that agency.
I don't know what the governor's intent is.
Do you have any issues with the speaker's infrastructure program and the $120 million over 2 years?
In the sense, paying as you go is an argument that the House Democrats have made for a year now. We also understand that when the bonding rates are so low now that the governor and most leaders say it's foolish for us not to at least consider it. Our position as a caucus was if the governor and Republican leaders were going to continue to push for cutting taxes, we would not support a bond issue, because saying to the people we're going to go into further debt while we cut taxes just doesn't make economic sense. However, putting $60 million a year towards infrastructure is important. Is all $60 million of that necessary right now? We don't know. We want to wait and see what their overall budget looks like, because common education, higher education, Department of Corrections, they all have significant needs. And if we come out and say we're going to put $60 million into the Capitol, but yet we don't give further resources to DOC or to state troopers, for example, that's when our caucus could have some real concerns with that.
Be asked perhaps as early as this next week to vote on House Bill 2032, which diverts $60 million from general revenue to capital repair, probably before you have a budget agreement. How are you going to vote?
Well, 2032 has the tax cuts in it as well, right? Well, our caucus is adamantly opposed to the tax cuts. I don't know if anybody wants to address the tax cut issue while you're here, but I mean, our caucus is, we believe that it's fiscally irresponsible to play guessing games with Oklahoma's economy and Oklahoma's future. We believe that in a time when we could see very little growth, we could be cutting $250 million out of our budget, just as we're trying to repair the holes that have been caused the last 5 years. That's just irresponsible.
The Pinnacle plan, DHS, how critical is that to get that $50 million that they need? They say they need, the director says he needs to get caught up and make some of these improvements immediately.
Well, I mean, I believe that's probably true, but how in the world can they talk about $50 million additional spending and they're talking about tax cuts? They always talk out of both sides of their mouths, okay? It's called hypocrisy. And by the way, I just wondered the question that hasn't been asked. This budget process, where is it? We're members of the Appropriations Committee. Have you heard anything about, more things change, more things stay the same around here. All this inclusiveness that they talked about, please. I talked about it yesterday when they violated Rule 8.8, when they rolled that bill out. Violated the House rules, but they did it anyway. Ask them. Where is the budget process, Mike? Ask the rank and file Republicans what they know about the budget process. I bet they don't know anything.
But we don't know if there's some sort of working group. I'll be honest with you. I wasn't on the floor yesterday.
I love that one.
But as I followed the proceedings yesterday, to have a freshman Republican stand up and say, "Well, you Democrats should have been at the working group on workers' comp." I think Representative Virgin pointed out, well, we would have been if there had been an invitation extended to us. And so, if that's what passes for openness and transparency by allowing a few selected groups, a few selected members from one political party to come to the table, we don't believe that passes the smell test for most Oklahomans. And if they're doing the same thing on the budget, that's unfortunate, because they've yet to invite members from our caucus to the table. We offer our suggestions when it comes to funding levels for certain agencies and groups, but in terms of allowing us to come in, sit down, and see where they're headed, they've yet to do that.
So the working group for the workers' comp,
the working group should have been, Mike.
So you're not getting told about these working groups?
No.
Whoa. I thought a working group was supposed to be like committee work. The bill goes through committee, has a public hearing. That's what we learned in civics class. But that's not what goes on around here. They gutted the bill after they passed a rule that said there would be no floor substitutes. And they did it anyway. So, by the way, mentioning Jerry Fent, if someone wants to file a lawsuit, that might get the thing turned out, because you have legislative authority, but if you violate legislative authority, then you can challenge it on constitutional grounds. It's like talking to walls.
far as the budget process goes, so isn't that how it's always done? I mean, even when Democrats controlled things, it was a handful of leadership.
We were told it was going to be a new era around here.
And that's it, Sean. I mean, to say that our predecessors may have done it wrong and therefore these guys get to do it the same way is a false argument. We weren't here at that time, and we believe that there should have been more openness and transparency. And the leadership have said that. They believe it should be more open and transparent. That's what they argue. Representative Murphy from Guthrie argues that all the time. But yet, when it comes to the major issues of the day, they're just as closed and cut off as they ever were, and sometimes even more so.
So Republican rank and file, and certainly Democrats really have no input, in your opinion, on the budget?
Well, our input comes from meetings like these, where we come out and we get into the press, try to educate our constituents as to the needs of the state of Oklahoma and what legislative leaders, what Republicans are trying to do with the budget or tax cuts. And then we see that come back to us. I know that when you all do your job and do a great job of educating the folks of what we say, we get phone calls, emails saying, please keep up the fight. Who do I need to communicate with? And so that's our primary role as a minority, is to be the voice of the people of the state of Oklahoma, be a conscience of the House, and to try to educate people, because I promise you, when you just listen to one side coming out of the leadership's office, you're not going to get the full story, and our job is to tell the rest of the story.
House Republicans yesterday during the debate on the traffic driver's license fee, they expressed some of that same frustration. They didn't know what was going on.
How did they vote?
Well, that's my next question. Don't you all communicate? I mean, it seems to me like if they're frustrated with the budget process and you're frustrated with the budget process, you all get together and say, look, until we get some answers, let's vote down some of these big workers' comp bills or these driver's license fee bills. Do you ever see that happening, or are they being threatened, or are the House Republicans being threatened, do you think?
Well, I know there were a lot of
Rumor.
there were rumors and discussions about potential threats over the workers' comp bill in order to keep everybody on the same page. I don't have any direct information about that, so I'm not going to speculate. Other than I saw people feeling the pressure. They would come, we would have, my members would discuss it with other members, and they'd say it's just unbelievable amount of pressure that we're getting to vote for the comp bill or something like that. As it pertains to the openness and allowing people to the table, I think what you saw last year when we helped to defeat the budget on the House floor for the first time in my 7 years, I think Representative Morrissett's been here 9, first time in his 9 years, that's the way that change can occur, and we try to encourage our Republican colleagues who are frustrated with the system to stand up with us and understand that it's more important to stand up on principle and for the people than it is to stand up for partisan ideology or because some leader tells you we've got to do it for the team. And hopefully this year, when that budget rolls out, if they don't fund education the way they're supposed to fund it, if they don't take care of the needs of the state of Oklahoma, you'll see us draw attention to that, and we hope that the Republicans who care about those children in our school system and care about our state troopers will join with us and defeat the budget and say, no, we're going to do this a different way.
The tax cut bill and the workers' comp are true examples of the Republican supermajorities in the House and Senate. They could lose 21 members, 21 of their Republicans could jump ship. They're still going to pass this bill. Mm-hmm. How do you reach out to the Oklahoma voters and say, this is what happens when you have this supermajority of?
Well, Michael, part of that is they've got to feel it. They've got to feel the effects, and we believe that if the workers' compensation law becomes law, when the next man or woman gets injured on the job and their benefits are reduced, they'll start to feel the effects. And also, we think that the fact that they've decided to push the income tax cutoff until 2015 is Exhibit A of that issue. They have decided to put off what would be $250 million worth of cuts to the state budget until after the next election cycle, until after the governor runs for re-election, until after everybody in the House and Senate runs for re-election. And that way, if it goes off a cliff and we have this crater, well, then they don't have to pay the political price for it. The governor never has to run for re-election again. And so they get to run out to the people of Oklahoma in 2014 and tell them, we cut your taxes. We did wonderful things. And oh, by the way, we did it while increasing spending. So they got the best of both worlds. But reality won't have settled in until after 2015. And when it does, and we may have to wait till then, our job is to educate, to stake our flag in the ground. And so that way, if things don't go well, and we don't believe they will, whether it comes to accepting federal dollars for Medicaid, whether it comes to workers' comp, whether it comes to fiscally irresponsible tax cuts, when they don't go well, then it's our responsibility to stand back up and say, we told you so, and we've got to make a change in our legislative leadership in that direction.
Leadership thinks they can get out early. In fact, there's some talk.
I want to address that for a second.
Can you?
All I can say is for the people of Oklahoma, we're all safer if we get out of here early.
Exactly. Let's start with that.
So,
I don't even understand why we should be here any more than May 1st. They got super majorities, both houses and the governor. I was told there are no disagreements anywhere. Get it done, and let's get out of here and save the taxpayers' money. They're always talking about that. Why aren't we getting out of here? Why aren't we out of here May 1st? Ask them that question. If we're all in agreement, right, Steve? Anastasia? Let's go.
but the sad part about it is they say they've come to an agreement, but yet we've not heard one word as to how much money education will get in a supplemental. This is the latest in session that I've ever been out here and not heard one single word as to supplemental funding for education. Not one. And so they've got an agreement, but yet they're unwilling to tell the people of Oklahoma who are affected by that agreement as to what that's really going to look like. And that's a travesty.
Get out early. If you can rally Republicans, both in the Senate and House, to vote against the budget, you can tie it up a little bit and maybe put some pressure on that way to get some funding that you want.
Of course, our goal would not be just to tie it up for the sake of the tie it up. Our goal would be to defeat the budget if it doesn't properly fund the core functions of a government that the people have elected us to fund. And if that happens, so be it. If they roll out a budget that takes care of the needs of the state of Oklahoma, we'll be surprised. But we won't be. You won't see us attempt to try to run the train off the tracks just to make us stay longer. Because as I said before, the sooner we get out of this building, the better off it is for the people of Oklahoma.